This is part 2 of looking at what Father Zachariah has to say in this book on Hesychasm about the Eastern religions. It's common for people to conflate the two. Oh wow, Hesychasm looks pretty like the Eastern religions with its mantras and its inner exploration, transcendental meditation. It looks a lot like Hinduism. Wow, it looks a lot like Buddhist meditation. Father Zachariah is going to pull the plug on that one and kind of say this is just on the very surface. It would appear to be so. But in reality, they're poles apart. So I did a video already on this, looking at the first 13 of these 32 pages. And now I'm going to continue with part 2, looking at the different cosmology and also prayer to a personal God, which can only come from an understanding of our personal nature and the fact that God is personal, extremely personal, essentially personal, tripersonal, the Trinity. And that out of that and the personal union of the incarnation comes our understanding of ourselves. Father Zachariah writes a lot, as did Saint Sophrony before him, on the hypostasis, becoming a true person. In fact, that's the name of some of his latter books. Okay. I suppose the reason I'm doing this is because this is a very high quality book, and I just, this channel's about books. Hesychasm. This is also a very, very high quality book, and I made a few videos on it already. But in case there was a sense of like, the dude's a bit of a syncretist, and isn't he wobbling towards Eastern religion here? I mean, this is not a work of syncretism. It's not a work of New Age mishmash or anything else. There are works like that are dangerously close to creating something that's neither Christianity nor Buddhism nor Taoism or anything else. This is not this book. It's very orthodox, written by an Orthodox priest and monk, disciple of Father Seraphim Rose. Brilliant. I started out my own faith journey with Buddhism, and really, a deep spiritual experiences through it over a number of years. It changed the course of my life. So I think God can use these things, but if I was to go back to them, I'd be definitely going backwards. Like God can use a lot of things to take us on a journey, but that doesn't mean we need to go back and constantly be revisiting them. Hence, in case we don't keep the journey going, if we keep going down memory lane, are we on the path? There are books that are dangerously close to syncretism, written by Christians. So this is one by Paul Nitter. Again, I just leave them to yourself to make your own judgment on them. The Hidden God, that's written by a Roman Catholic priest, and his assertion is that there is a God behind Buddhism, and therefore it's not an atheistic system. And he tries to link Christianity, apophatic mysticism of, Pseudo Dionysius and the Eastern tradition with Buddhism. So, and of course, we've got the world famous Thomas Merton, who became very Zen, very Buddhist towards the end of his life, and died in, was it India? In tragic circumstances. And then, books like Zen Catholicism, which actually, this was written in the 50s, and got this from the charity shop, Oxfam, and it's not a work of syncretism. It's actually this author, this monastic, the Cistercian author back in the day. He's like He's saying, look, cuidado, be careful. So 1963. He's saying, look, be careful with all of this stuff that's coming to the West. There is some serious parallels, but there is some significant differences. So it's not a work like Thomas Merton was later to write. Um, Paul Nitter's like, without Buddha, I could not be a Christian. And he just says, look, I'm both. I'm both. I'm Buddhist. I'm Christian. Yeah, I know there's challenges. Yeah, I know they don't sit well in terms of, I know there's different metaphysics, different theology, different underpinning philosophy, etc. But hey, at the end of the day, I can merge them to some extent. I can reconcile the differences to some extent. And I hold the hand open of thought where there's challenges, but hey, I'm going to stick with both. He's married to a Buddhist, which obviously is going to influence that to some extent. A good man and a very good book, but peligroso, shall we say, for somebody that wants to pursue a genuinely orthodox Christian spirituality. Then you've got, the likes of Thich Nhat Hanh and things like that. A very, friendly, loving Zen Vietnamese monk, very well known. He wrote two of these, first part and second part. Again, parallels, etc., etc. Then you've got this one by Susan Stabile. She is Italian-American, ex-Buddhist nun, ex-Tibetan Buddhist nun. She became Catholic again, went back to her roots of Catholicism, to some extent influenced by the Dalai Lama, saying, look, I'm not out to convert people, just be a better Christian through your Buddhist practices. And rather than renounce all of that, she kind of looks at ways to build bridges and say, look, I learned some brilliant techniques, got some good insights as a Buddhist. What can we bring together? Now, again, we're all on a journey with that. I'm not here pontificating. Then you've got like Jean-Yves Leloup. Now, he is an Orthodox priest of the French Orthodox, community. And he's wrote a lot of books on hesychasm, on, traditional Orthodox spirituality. But I do believe this is a work of syncretism to some extent. I think he just says, look, I'm not here to convert. This is basically a series of talks he gave at a Zen retreat and basically shows, I think I haven't read the book yet, only arrived the other day. I'm intrigued by him and by his work. I think his the place he's coming from is like, people have different spiritual traditions. As riches in both. We don't have to convert one another. We can be true to our own tradition and meditate together. I believe he has a meditation retreat center in France that does something of that ilk, almost like ecumenical interfaith spirituality, whilst, still giving Orthodox liturgies and stuff. And I know, fine, there'll be folk listening to that going, whoa, that's bang it. I'm not saying yay, I'm not saying nay. I'm just saying what's out there. For those who want a more orthodox response to interfaith and ecumenism and all these things, well, of course, you've got this classic here, Orthodoxy in the Future of the Religion of the Future, Father Seraphim Rose. Yeah, he's no friend of interfaith dialogue, especially in terms of, sharing practices. He's definitely no friend of the Eastern religions. He thinks that, they're bringing in, I don't want to speak on what he has to say, but he'd be no friend of that. If you want that traditional Orthodox approach to Buddhism and the Eastern religions, then you've got it right there. D.T. Suzuki was a great friend of Thomas Merton, who wrote a book about mysticism, Christian and Buddhist, and he'd be looking at almost exclusively at Meister Eckhart, who was kind of on the heretical fringe of Christianity, a German Catholic Franciscan who got into trouble with the Catholic Church and died under investigation. But a lot of his writings kind of lend themselves to kind of pantheism, very obscure and vague and very smart, so you're not quite sure what he's really saying, and hence why he was under investigation, I suppose. And a lot of his writings are very beautiful, very profound. Okay, let's return to this one finally. Father Zacharias, in his book Hesychasm on Eastern religions, Eastern cosmogony. Just going to do a quick review of the stuff that's found in that chapter and the chapter on prayer here. So what he talks about, he has the turn of phrase that to some extent, he says every religion that's either philosophical or of human origin, as opposed to divine revelation, tends to conjure up a God that is impersonal, tends to conjure up an absolute reality which is impersonal. I often say to my students, God is not an energy drink. And that's what God essentially becomes with the likes of Brahman or the Atman, the universal being that pervades all things, is all things, to which all things return. The idea is that one must dissolve, that personality, our individuality, our personhood is an illusion. It's something we have to shed, like the skin of a snake, in order to come to the ultimate reality, to dissolve into impersonal bliss. I liken that a bit like, taking LSD and being a hippie, but there's always the come down and always the chaos. It's not a clean love. And the problem is, what can you love? If all is one, then there's nothing to love. Nothing to hate, you could say, but there's nothing to love. And how am I supposed to love sacrificially if you are me and I am you? In Saint Sophrony calls this committing metaphysical suicide. A very nice turn of phrase, that it's a form of metaphysical suicide. Having to die to the person and to merge with this absolute. Any attempt to kind of climb back, everybody searches for the eternal, says Father Zachariah here. Everybody thirsts for the eternal because we're made in God's image. But any attempt to try and climb up to eternity on our own back with our own, metaphysical, human invented system is ultimately a Tower of Babel experience. With futility, trying to climb our way up to heaven on our own efforts. He even says it's equivalent to a Luciferian spirit of self-deification. And then he gives the example of transcendental meditation, which Saint Sophrony had practiced in his youth in Paris as a student there, and then deeply repented of it, came back to his Orthodox faith and said, "No way, Jose, they ain't compatible." Father Zachariah goes into detail on this, and he says, rather than actually cleansing the person of the passions, there's an incubation of the passions going on. And what's going on is the effort is to eliminate thought from the mind in order to focus on oneself, to self-focus again. He then asks a poignant question and says, is this not like in the Gospels when Jesus says, be careful with the spirit that's gone out of you, the evil spirit that's gone out, finding the room is swept and clean, comes back with 7 of his mates, 7 demons, and the last state of that person is worse than the beginning. Many people turn to these Eastern practices. I did myself as a young lad, as in a bid to they've maybe been burnt by hedonistic materialism, disaffected by capitalism or whatever it is, and they're looking for a way, something spiritual, a meaning to life. They're looking for that transcendence that we all seek. But whilst there is this is what I found, whilst there's initial bliss and initial cleansing, definite, you know, I found in doing deep Vipassana meditation, ultimately, I soon felt in a cage of metaphysics, you know, believing that if I swatted a mosquito, it was the same as swatting a human being, and, you know, just super sensitive and full of Eastern dogmas, really. You know, it was a life without God, and it was a life where I believed, well, look, I wish it wasn't this way, but I do believe it is this way, and I've just got to plow on. And the message was, nobody's coming to rescue you. You've got to rescue yourself. Nobody's coming to save you. You've got to save yourself by meditation, by the Buddhist disciplines. There's then a section on passionlessness. He talks about you know, God's passionlessness. God is passionless. He's not riddled with desires and up and down like a yo-yo. But passionlessness is a great section where he describes what that passionlessness is, with quotes, extended quotes from Father Sophrony, St. Sophrony's writings. It's not cold indifference or blanking all thought. It's not some Aristotelian prime mover of a a God that's just enraptured with his own beauty and can have no thought for us lower changing mortals. No, there's none of that. And then he goes on to talk about what passionlessness is for us. It is also not cold indifference. It is not zoning out, and certainly not transcending good and evil, which sounds very fashionable, but it's usually chaotic, and what does it even mean? It is Christ living in us, Christ light shining into our darkness, as St. Paul puts it, inspiring in us new feelings, new desires, new thoughts, a new light of eternal understanding. Passionlessness, he says, is union with God in gratitude and love. It is, as St. Seraphim of Sarov puts it, acquiring the Holy Spirit. Acquiring the Holy Spirit so that we would be impelled not by our fallen lower passions, but rather by the Spirit of love, the Spirit of God, the Holy Spirit. I'll leave it there. Apologies for the long video. There's still one more part of this 32-page expose on Eastern religions that I'll do in the third part. Please God.